Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at the latest album, the sophomore album, in fact, from Fractal Universe, entitled Rhizomes of Insanity, if I'm reading that correctly here. It's been pretty quiet in the world of progressive and technical death metal, which is a little surprising considering last year was arguably one of the genre's best years ever. Rivers of Nile and Horrendous both put out, I would argue, some real game changers for the world of tech and progressive death metal. Augury as well, a Canadian tech death legend over here, put out one of their strongest records in a long time. All three of those bands had each of their respective albums on the Metal Meltdown's Best Albums of 2018 list as a result. Not to mention some incredibly interesting albums from bands like Slugage and Portal and Gorod. Some surprise hits as well, one in particular, Manner of Infinite Forms from Tumult. I'm not sure if that fully counts as tech death, mind you, but it's certainly more complex than your average death metal record, so fuck it, I'm gonna throw it in there. To put it simply, last year was a great year to be into tech death and prog death. It just was. And while we've had a couple interesting records here and there so far in 2019, there hasn't been anything nearly on the level as what we saw from a lot of bands last year. Not in my opinion, at least. I know a lot of people like that Icky Poissy record, however the fuck that name is pronounced, but that was far too flashy and ridiculous for my personal liking. With all that in mind, I will happily say that I think we have found maybe one of the first really standout tech death and prog death records of 2019, the sophomore album from this band. I've heard a lot about it since it was announced. I was really impressed by the singles I heard beforehand, and a lot of people have been talking about this record. A lot of people in the comments of the Metal Meltdown, for that matter, a lot of requests to look at this album. And I happily obliged, because this is a very unique and interesting album. One thing that stands out to me, more so than any tech death band, is that in the case of Fractal Universe, it's very clear to me, at least, that they're not inspired by a lot of tech death at all. They're not interested in nonsensical technical wankery, and they're not interested in pounding your fucking skull out for 30 fucking minutes with nothing to say and nothing of value to do. No, they actually want to write fucking songs. They have ideas, they have concepts. They're inspired by genres outside of the world of tech death. They're inspired by artists like Don Swano and Andy Winter. They're inspired by a lot of technical thrash bands. Revocation comes to mind particularly. Some people have noted influence from a band called Darkane. I'm not personally familiar, but I'll take their word for it. I also hear influence from Textures, the Dutch progressive metalcore band. Probably the closest thing to an actual tech death influence I hear on this record is maybe Cynic, particularly Cynic's first album. But that being said, I think that's more of a result of all these combining sounds and influences coming together in a Cynic-like fashion. And on top of that, the band is very happy to highlight actual melodies. I mean, it's not exactly stadium rock. This isn't Bon Jovi, but it is in line with some of the melodies that we've seen from modern metal bands. This is in line, specifically, I would say, with Revocation, going back to them, and the way that they write a lot of their melodies and the way that they arrange a lot of their songs. And what's really interesting about this particular record is its concept. It's an album that is based around the idea of insanity, exploring what creates insanity, what helps insanity thrive in people, and it allows them to do even funkier things. It allows them to go to even funkier territory, to do weirder arrangements, and to do things that are not associated within the world of tech death or even within the worlds of those artists we've mentioned. And it makes for, frankly, one of the more original tech death records I've heard, and probably one of the more original death metal records I've heard in general all year. It does have some rough edges, which do, in my opinion, bring down the album. We'll address those later. But all things considered, yeah, the hype's pretty real. This is a seriously good record. The one thing that any good tech death band must have, period, even if you're not the best songwriter, is you have to have good musicianship. This genre is so inherently and objectively technical and precise that you literally cannot survive without a good solid foundation. And Fractal Universe have that. And they're also very restrained with it, you know? They don't just throw random flashy solos at you to wow you with their technical prowess. Oh, look, I can play 18 bajillion notes in a fucking second. Instead, a lot of the structures in these songs are actually pretty steady, built upon some really great grooves, some really great percussion, and when it does go into funkier territory, it knows when to reel back, and as a result, it actually creates a really interesting contrast that makes the music more exciting in these more diverse moments. A song like Masterpiece's Parallelism is a great example. It's got thick, hearty, progressive metalcore grooves. It's got an opening riff that reminds me a lot of like modern Black Dahlia murder. Thick, earthy rhythm guitars supporting some really sweet, flashy, glossy guitar solos. It's incredibly well thought out, and at no point do I feel like the band is simply showing off their technical skills, because again, they know when to pull back. They know when to keep things just simple enough. They actually want you to listen and absorb the music and understand what's happening. Another great example, opening track on Heroic Realizations, which to some extent kind of feels like some Opeth shit, but injected with some really fucking raw death metal. The vocals on this track are really manic and psychotic. They come at you pretty fast, and that chorus comes at you pretty fast too. And expanding on those ideas, you also have a song like Rising Oblivion, which has some downright psychotic patterns. It seems to jump around all over the place, and I could not personally follow it if I was drumming in this band, let me tell you that much. It's very eerie and offbeat and unconventional, but still weirdly pretty easy to follow thanks to some really solid lead guitars and some pretty good vocals. And then there's the final track, Chiasmus of the Damned, which builds upon a lot of the ideas that we've established here with even bigger grooves, even bigger choruses, even bigger guitar parts. I mean, props to everyone in the band. Musically, across the board, everyone does an incredible job. Everything is incredibly well thought out and articulated. It's downright surgical precise, even in its most manic and confused moments. The sound mix captures a lot of this really perfectly. I love sound mixes that capture all these raw imperfections within the sound, like the scratches of guitar strings and shit like that, and you hear a lot of that. It makes it feel all the more organic, gives this classic analog recorded feel. And it benefits the concept as well, highlighting these brief little imperfections. It just makes it feel so human, which is especially awesome when you look at so many tech death bands, and frankly it feels like a lot of this music was made by fucking computers, because it's so precise and so flashy and so fucking ridiculous. Like, it's just too much. This feels human. I really love that aspect. Now, mind you, there are some times where I do think maybe the band is a bit confused, and I'm not entirely sure what sound they're going for. It's still effective, and again, you could argue it adds to the concept, but it's something to note nonetheless. The only thing that really holds me back on this album is that while I like the approach of a lot of the vocals, I don't necessarily like the execution, particularly when it comes to a lot of those melodies. The clean vocals on this thing are frankly just really messy and really scratchy. It reminds me a lot of that recent Asthma Castle record, and much like that album, I kind of just want to sit this singer down and get him a glass of water. Like, he sounds fucking hoarse as a motherfucker. I'm going to give this thing a 4 out of 5. Sure, the album has some genuine rough patches, but the concept, the musicianship, and the production is so fucking good that it all comes together, and you don't really mind those rough patches. And frankly, sometimes those rough patches help, as I noted before. They help the album feel more organic, more human, more honest, more open. I'm not sure how the diehard tech death fan base will respond to this, considering that in my personal experience, a lot of these guys are just looking for flashy guitar solos and full-out extremity. But you still have that on here. It's just restrained and better balanced. It's not all about those things. The band actually progresses to things rather than showing off just pure fucking musical wankery. Like, Fractal Universe at no point on this record fucking jerk themselves off the way that bands like Allegion do, the way that bands like Rings of Saturn do. Like, no, they're not interested in that at all. They have a vision, and they have succeeded in showing you that vision and creating that vision. Once again, I think we found maybe the first true great tech death record of 2019. I will definitely be keeping a very close eye on Fractal Universe in the future. 4 out of 5, a really great album. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.